Okay, this video is why do most patients never get better? You know, there's sort of a myth amongst a lot of people who say, oh, America has the best healthcare system and, you know, the new technology keeps getting better and better and, you know, better outcomes. That's all a big joke. People are fatter, sicker, and stupider than ever before, and things are going backwards, not forwards. And one thing it's good to realize is that technology really depends on the intentions and the skill of the person using it. For example, there's a big hype going around that, you know, artificial intelligence is going to improve medicine. And that's laughable. I mean, it's obvious. Artificial intelligence, who's going to write the program? It's going to be written by the drug companies. And what is it going to say? The drug companies are going to say, prescribe more drugs. So it's not going to make things better. It's going to make things worse. It's obvious, okay? And then what's some of the most common problems I see in healthcare? What I typically see is something like this picture here. So this is a Pilgrimage to Canterbury Tales by Paul Hardy. Okay, and the gist of it is that every day in front of all the hospitals in the Western world, there's like this river of fat hypertensive diabetics that pours into the hospital. And the patients, meanwhile, they're like, well, I'm doing something for my health. And they're going for a follow-up CAT scan for a possible cyst or a tumor in their kidney or their liver or their lung or something like that, a colonoscopy or whatever. Lots of patients, they love going for ultrasounds and MRIs and all this stuff. And I got a news flash for you. You don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. Now, to me, that's so obvious, it's not even funny. But what I'm saying is, for every patient who becomes a low-fat vegan, there's another 20,000 that go for a CAT scan, an ultrasound, an MRI, an X-ray, a blood test, a colonoscopy, or some other test. And don't get me wrong, yeah, sure, sometimes you need those tests. But they're used totally out of proportion to anybody who does something therapeutic. Another common mistake is people tend to assume it's a doctor's job to get you better. It's not. Doctor has zero obligation to the patients. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. The doctor's obligation is they have to generate billing codes so that they get paid, so their hospital makes money, and they have to follow a standardized form that the insurance company will reimburse. They don't get paid for telling you anything. They don't get paid for, unless it's part of the standard of care. So what I'm trying to say is whether the patient lives or dies doesn't matter in terms of the doctor's concerns, because they get paid the same amount if the patient lives or dies. They get paid the same amount in terms of the brief interval if the patient's cured or stays sick. As a matter of fact, in the long run, they make a lot more money typically if the patient stays sick. So they have no incentive really to cure you. The way to think of a doctor is doctors often do know a lot, especially in their field. So you want to benefit from their knowledge. So what I'm trying to say is the standard of care is usually to prescribe a pill or sell a device, a surgery, or a blood test or an imaging test, something like that. So the patient can benefit from their knowledge, but don't think that they're obligated to help you get better. It's actually not in their interest, typically for most of the chronic diseases, that you get better. It's in their interest to keep you hooked on drugs. And doctors aren't trained to cure people. They're trained to just sell devices and sell drugs. They've been trained that you can't cure a patient for the chronic diseases, and therefore you wouldn't expect it to. And it's kind of funny, reminded me of the Schopenhauer quote. He says something about philosophers in the 1800s, the university philosophy professors, that it never occurs to them that someone might actually be a philosopher. They just teach it, you know, to make some money and have a job. He says, but when someone like him came along who actually was a philosopher trying to figure out what was true or not, he seemed like a bizarre, strange animal to them. Okay, so that's a key point. I can't emphasize that enough. You don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. And going to a hospital, it's not a party, it's not a pilgrimage. It's very dangerous. It could easily, that hospital, bankrupt you or make you very sick. The USA educational system is based on atheistic Darwinism, which basically says survival of the fittest, might is right. And it says that humans have no divine soul about them. There's nothing special about them. They're just primates that talk, talking monkeys. And again, what this all means is they have no obligation to you. So don't think that they do, because they really don't. I've never in my life been to a single hospital where anybody kept close track of outcomes. I have been on some good surgical services where they had a morbidity and mortality conference like once a month, and that was a good thing because you would learn from those mistakes. They held themselves accountable for making mistakes in patient outcomes, or just having patients who did poorly because no one knew what to do. That was valuable, but those are few and far between, M&M conferences, okay? And here's how you cure a disease. You find out what causes it and what makes it worse. And then usually they're the same thing. And then you avoid those things. There it is. And doctors don't know this. You find out what causes it, you find out what makes it worse, and you avoid those things. And then you learn what improves health in general. So what improves health in general is, eat the best diet. Eat the low fat, low sodium, whole food, vegan diet with no oil, no ETOH, alcohol, no tobacco, no MJ. Okay, filter your water so you don't get all those toxins and all those estrogenic chemicals. People with a good support system, family, sense of purpose, religion, they tend to be a lot healthier. They get your sunshine, get your exercise, they tend to be significantly healthier. Avoid excess EMF, excessive stress, caffeine, sleep deprivation, all the negative stuff. Okay, and so, in a simplest sense, you could say you're like a car. If you buy a Rolls Royce and your body is more important than a car, you got to keep it your whole life. You can buy a new car, you can't get a new body. It says put premium gas in it, put premium gas in it. Why wouldn't you do that? And premium gas is the best diet. And then I jokingly said, it's, your health is basically like Super Mario Brothers or any video game. The character walks through an obstacle course, and then the character, if he does the good things, he gets energy points. You make a mistake, you screw up, you lose energy points. And so you either gain or lose health points. And, here's things that make you healthier. If you want, you can read through all these. We've talked about them in previous lectures. Avoid toxic chemicals, avoid toxic people. Do the positive things. And, social things can factor into that. Pleasant music, pleasant conversation. They make us feel better. They're good for our health. They lower our stress level. Okay. When we help other people, we release or reward neurotransmitters in our brain, and they make us happier and healthier. So you're not just helping the other person, you're helping yourself. We talked in plenty of other lectures all about all these estrogenic chemicals. And, because I think that's a big reason why some people are having a hard time losing the weight when they feel like they're doing things right in terms of the other factors, their diet, their sleep, and all that. So make sure you're filtering your water, for example, to get rid of the estrogenic chemicals. Consider eating organic, for example, because then you avoid things like atrazine. Okay, a lot of people, they get fat, sick, and stupid, by 55 years of age, somewhere around there. And then as they're stupider, they lose that intellectual energy and curiosity. Then they pretty much have no chance of getting better. And a very common thing is I see brains that look like this all the time. So here's a normal brain, normal sized ventricles, clean periventricular brain parenchyma. And then here's like this is worse than usual, but this would be a common brain I see, let's say, in a 75-year-old and up. A whole bunch of small strokes. All the white spots are strokes. They're called, this is a flare sequence, so they're called hyperintense. Bright means hyperintense on MRI, so they're extensive bilateral, periventricular, and subcortical flare hyperintensities is how I would dictate this case. And also mild dilation of the ventricles, I would say. Diffuse cerebral atrophy with associated mild ventriculomegaly. Okay, so this is a typical lousy-looking brain of your typical fat, sick, and stupid Westerner. Okay. Person who, eat healthy through their life, they probably have none of those small little strokes. Okay, so now here is some life curves. Approximate life curve, you eat the standard American diet, you're going to start having health problems, late 40s, early 50s, quite often fat. The women who eat the standard American diet, they lose their looks pretty fast. I've seen this pattern, that women often lose their looks really fast. A woman tends to be good looking no matter what she does before she's 20, 25. But I see lots of women, they're all fat and they sort of lost their beauty in their 30s even. If they eat a Mediterranean diet, they'll keep your beauty a little longer. But you can have some women eating a vegan diet, they can be very pretty in their 70s, So it's possible to keep your looks a lot longer. You all seen that video about Annette Larkin's most beautiful grandmother in the world. So I'm showing, why wouldn't you want to be on this curve, the low-fat vegan curve, where you live longer and you live healthier and you keep your brain a lot longer? Okay, we talked about starch being the healthiest food because it's low caloric density. It stretches your stomach, so you get early satisfaction of hunger, and then it's slowly absorbed because the intestinal enzymes have to peel the fiber off from the glucose, so you get a slow, steady absorption of glucose into the blood. You have a prolonged normal blood glucose. You're in the normal zone a prolonged amount of time. You feel good. You satisfy your hunger with the fewest calories, and you're skinny. The foods that are great for that are potatoes, sweet potatoes, and rice. All have 1% of calories from fat. And there's other really low-fat foods. Lentils have 3% of calories from fat, so they make you skinny and healthy. And the populations that eat those foods predominantly, they're all skinny. Okay, and you look at these curves here. These are postprandial, after eating blood glucose curves. You eat simple sugars, You spike your blood glucose too rapidly, and you'll have a tendency for the pancreas to overcompensate and drive your sugars down, blood sugar down too rapidly. That's rebound hypoglycemia. You feel lousy, you'll have a tendency to eat more simple sugars, and you go up and down like a roller coaster, and you get fat from that. Okay, if you eat high fat like the red curve here, the fat gets into the skeletal muscles faster than does the glucose, and so you end up, it causes insulin resistance, like it senses overnutrition. The fat, especially sad fat, inhibits mitochondrial complex 3, and you get this, the glucose type 4 transporters in the cytoplasm are then signaled to not go up to the plasma membrane, so you can't take glucose in, so you get prolonged hyperglycemia, and that's insulin resistance, and that leads to diabetes. Okay, where the starch keeps you in the normal zone a prolonged amount of time, the Goldilocks zone, the golden mean of Aristotle, and that's where you want to be. Okay, then why is it that you can't count on the healthcare system? The reason you can't count on the healthcare system is its job is not to help you. Its job is to make money. Anybody who tries to study the healthcare system and thinks it's based on helping people will constantly run into conundrums. It just doesn't make sense. But as soon as you say, well, gee, the purpose of this is to make money, then it'll all make sense. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is they spend billions of dollars on research, but all they're really searching for is how can we win the lottery with a new drug, okay, or a new surgical device that we can implant in a person. Versus they don't even pay attention. You know, this is the old joke about the drunk. You know, the drunk's looking for his keys under the lamplight. Somebody walks by and says, oh, is that where you dropped your keys? He says, no, I dropped them over here. Then why don't you look over there? Well, there's no light over there. So what I'm saying, there's no money over there. There's no money over here. So all they do is mess around the last 50 years. You know, so-called war on cancer is a big joke. They're never going to cure it because if they did, they would lose money, okay? And then you look here, all these things that actually really do help a person improve their health to get better, they're free. You got to pay for food anyways because you got to eat. Yeah, healthier food might be a little expensive, but not so much. Starches tend to be cheap. They tend to store for a long time. You can buy them in bulk. So these are the things that actually make you better. So what I'm saying is, if a patient wants to get better, learn what causes your disease, avoid those things, and then do all the things that make any person healthy, all right? And then other people say, well, you know, such and such a regulatory agency or institution is going to save me. I don't think so. If you look at this, look at all these big name institutions, including the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics. They all support putting F- in your water, which is a major, major, major poison. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is no one cares about you. That's important to realize, so that once you realize that no one really cares about you, then you realize you're responsible for yourself. And you have to use your brain. So don't get me wrong, you can get some valuable knowledge from doctors. Doctors can really help a lot of people, and they have, you know. They're great at acute problems, okay? They're great at, you know, chronic complex problems that require, you know, a joint replacement, dialysis or something like that. And so they can do lots of good things, but you need to have a general idea what they can do for you or not, and not just blindly trust them. Because like for chronic disease, they basically say it's like Dante's, you know, in the gates of hell, abandon hope, all ye who enter. They basically tell you this is a chronic disease. We cannot cure you. And that's why it's ridiculous, I think, that conventional medicine is the standard of care, because it's really not. The conventional medicine is like a bunch of cheerleaders who say, we're the best, we always lose, we never win, we're the best team. What kind of a sports team would you consider the best team if they lost every single game? That's what conventional medicine does with chronic disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. They lose every single game with atherosclerosis. So, you know, that's not a smart option if you want to cure those diseases. And of course, there's the metaphor of the last straw broke the camel's back. So stop piling up stuff on the camel's back. And in order to stop doing that, you need to know what things make it worse. No alcohol, not one drop. No tobacco, not one puff. No MJ, not one puff, okay? No animal foods, not one bite, and that includes no dairy and no eggs. Okay, once you go through this stuff, then you'll have your best chance of getting better, because the body itself is programmed to heal all around the clock. And then, of course, here's all the mitochondria inhibitors, and these things are real common, lots of them. And be careful about just randomly taking some pills, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, mitochondria inhibitors, antifungals, mold inhibitors, and processed food. Okay, the more you inhibit your mitochondria, the less energy you have, and the more likely you are you're going to feel lousy and sick. Okay, I've gone through these in previous lectures, and there's over 50 of them. Okay, and here's the basic pattern. You are here, okay? You do the SMART path, healthy diet, exercise, maintain your social support system, have a sense of purpose of religion and all that stuff. You got a good chance to make it to 90 in pretty good health on average. You go down the typical chump path, you'll probably be dead around 70, and you will suffer a lot, and you'll be cognitively slow long in advance. And then here's the other things, of course. Get your sunshine for vitamin D, get your exercise to make your immune system work well and improve your self-esteem. Get your sleep, be nice, help other people, all this stuff. God's way. It's free. It's available to anybody. It's been available since the beginning of time, and it usually works. Whereas man's way is expensive, it's painful, and it seldom works. It'll bankrupt you, it'll torture you, and it'll make you die prematurely. This is the Spartan vegan diet, which is very much like the McDougall diet. It's a low-fat, plant-based diet. You know, here's the social stuff at the bottom. Here's the starches, here's the fruits, there's the veggies, there's the B12. It's very easy, sustainable to do. I've done it for many, many years. Okay, here is cytoplasmic calcium. Many simultaneous toxins are pushing up our cytoplasmic calcium in our brain cells and other cells of our body. So you want to make sure you can deal with that. The way you deal with that is you need a lot of energy. I'm going to come to the picture that shows it. So basically, you go to these, backward populations, indigenous populations, where they're all a bunch of illiterates. Then you see plant foods and they're all healthy. So you don't have to be a genius. Just eat the plant foods that are low-fat plant foods, and your arteries will stay open. They don't have any hypertension. They don't have any diabetes. This is like in Kenya. You go to the United States, blacks, like tons and tons of hypertension and lots of complications from that and lots of death due to sequela from hypertension. Whereas if you go to Kenya, this is a 1929 study, Donison, 1,800 consecutive admissions. How many have hypertension? Zero. Nobody. Nobody is hypertensive if they ate a plant-based diet all their life. It's not genetic. That's not the problem. The problem is diet and lifestyle. Rossetto effect just meant like the Italian families in the 1950s and 60s. They supported each other, lived together, helped each other, and they were much healthier than demographically matched populations because social support makes a big difference. So here's this painting called Filial Piety, okay? And basically this old guy, he's alive because the family loves him and takes care of him. So you maintain a social support system, and they'll help you, you help them, and everybody's better off. So that has a big role. Religion contributes to that. Getting along with family and others is important. And then a lot of people, they think they're clever. Oh, why do you believe in God? Are you stupid or something? I'm like, no, you little brainwashed conformist nitwit. If you really study science and you think about it, it's just too incredible to not have happened by God. And the same old metaphor here. This is sort of the Lennox metaphor. He's the mathematician over at Harvard, and at Oxford. And he basically said, I think it was him who said, if you walked to the beach and you saw your name written in the sand, you would say an intelligent, literate person wrote my name. So your name, let's say your name is your name. Okay, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a couple letters there. Okay, you would know a literate person did. The ocean can't do that. So why would you think that the human genome, that's 3.3 billion base pairs of very complex chemistry, could be written by itself spontaneously? That's a ridiculous statement. And the smartest people who ever lived, they're quite religious. Here's Michael Crichton, the genius writer from Harvard Med School, guy who wrote Jurassic Park. He says, human embryology is so complicated, we can barely describe it, yet alone understand it. Isaac Newton, atheism is so senseless. When I look at the solar system, I see the Earth at the right distance from the sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light. That did not happen by chance. Michelangelo, the greatest artist, Bach, the greatest musician. It goes on and on. I can tell you, the more you study it closely, the more you will believe in God. The brain, the eye, the immune system, the clotting system, it's way too complicated. All right, now here's a painting of a bunch of knights, and the ladies are, saying bye-bye to them while they go off on a mission, whatever that is. And what I'm saying is, think of that as being like your immune system. You want to protect your immune system because your immune system is what fights off infections. Your immune system is what removes metastatic cancer cells. It keeps you healthy and alive. And so you want to avoid the things that make it worse, like you don't want to become fat. You get a fat cell spillover effect. That suppresses the immune system. You don't want to eat high-fat diets. That suppresses the immune system. I think this whole omega-3 supplement stuff is a bunch of nonsense. That will suppress the immune system. Excessive stress, caffeine, sleep deprivation, all raise the same hormones. Cortisol and catecholamines suppress the immune system. Excessive estrogen chemicals can suppress the immune system, make it dysfunctional. 80%, well, they make it dysfunctional. Let's just say make it dysfunctional. They confuse the immune system potentially there. All right, so anyways, just giving you a sense of what's really going on. And then, like I said, way too much calcium. I sort of probably should have put these slides together. You get calcium inside a cell to activate. It's like the aristocrat of ions, and it makes something happen. It's like flipping on a light switch to activate the cell. Concentration of calcium in the center of the cell, in the cytoplasm, is about 10,000 to 15,000 times lower than it is in the extracellular matrix. So the point is, you need ATP anywhere you're going to be pumping out calcium to reestablish a low concentration of calcium in the cytoplasm. And so that ATP is like bailing water out of the bottom of a boat that's got some leaks in it. And so what I'm saying is, the bailers, if you will, are like your mitochondria for producing ATP, producing energy. So you want to avoid anything that could damage your mitochondria. And you want to get your exercise and sleep to get your mitochondria working better. Because otherwise you lose all these guys that are bailing the calcium out of the cytoplasm. And in the end, what does it all come down to? We should live pretty much like our ancestors. Good to live like Adam and Eve, but keep our indoor heating and plumbing. Eat things that they could have eaten, okay? Keep your life simple, you know. Be nice to each other, loving, have a good family, good social support system. That makes humans healthy. So anyways, hope that's helpful.